Welcome to the Property Elite podcast. I'll be your host, Jen Lehman, Chartered Surveyor and co-founder of Property Elite. Stay tuned each week for more on industry hot topics, market updates and new RICS guidance.
In this week's blog, we look at the new RICS professional standard countering financial crime, bribery, corruption, money laundering, terrorist financing and sanctions violations, second edition. This replaces the former first edition professional standard, which had a slightly different but similarly long title. This is essential reading for all RICS APC and associate RICS candidates, as well as qualified chartered surveyors. It relates specifically to the ethics, rules of conduct and professionalism competency, and is something that you need to be thinking about when acting for any new or existing client. You can read the full professional standard on the RICS website. So when does this professional standard take effect? 17th of December 2025. Where does the professional standard apply? Everywhere. It is a global professional standard. As a result, you need to be aware of a relevant local, regional, national and global legislation relating to these topics. Where legislation contradicts the professional standard, legislation will always take precedence. How is the professional standard structured? The professional standard is structured as follows. With a glossary, this is worth reading to ensure you understand key terminology used elsewhere in the guidance. These are also terms that you could be asked about in your RICS APC final assessment interview. An introduction, bribery and corruption, money laundering and terrorist financing, sanctions, and other considerations. Do I have to follow the professional standard? Professional standards provide requirements for RICS members and regulated firms to follow. Requirements are mandatory where the word must is used and are best practice where the word should is used. Why has the guidance been published? Real estate can be used to launder illicit funds. The surveyors are in a pivotal position to identify potential red flags and alert the relevant authorities. This helps promote trust in the profession and protect the public interest. The RICS recognise that the markets in which we operate are dynamic and new risks relating to money laundering and corruption are evolving quickly. The new professional standard deals with and provides guidance to surveyors on these new areas of risk. As RICS state in the guidance, financial crime is not an abstract risk. When professionals uphold high standards, stolen public funds are harder to launder and communities are less exposed to speculative surges powered by secrecy. When they are not, corruption and financial crime spread, and the costs are borne by the many so that a few may profit. The profession cannot be a bystander. Taken seriously and applied consistency, we can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. What does the professional standard say about bribery and corruption? RICS states the following mandatory requirements for regulated firms. Not offer or accept bribes, comply with legislation, report any suspicious activity, carry out regular and appropriate written risk assessments and due diligence, and then document compliance with the professional standard. RICS then provide additional guidance on best practice to meet the mandatory requirements, such as having written anti-bribery and corruption policies, a gift in hospitality register, staff training, appointed money laundering office, staff code of conduct, and due diligence on suppliers. RICS state the following mandatory requirements for members: not to offer or accept bribes, have the appropriate knowledge to comply with the professional standards, and report any suspicious activity. RICS then provide additional guidance on best practice to meet the mandatory requirements such as declaring any gifts and hospitality, attending training, adhering to employer policies, and taking a leadership role in relation to compliance if in senior management. RICS state the following mandatory requirements for regulated firms and members. They are to be aware of risks faced in regular business activities and plan how to deal with challenges if operating in higher risk sectors or jurisdictions. As with most areas of RICS regulation, the nature of how regulated firms and members deal with these challenges need to be risk-based and appropriate. What does the professional standard say about laundering and terrorist financing? RICS state the following mandatory requirements for regulated firms. Exercise caution and not facilitate or be complicit in money laundering or terrorist financing. To have systems and training in place. To report any suspicious activity. To comply with relevant legislation. And must avoid tipping off, retain confidential personal information to comply with relevant legislation. They must not ignore red flags. They should carry out regular risk assessments and terminate business relationships where necessary. They should carry out standard or enhanced due diligence in high-risk cases, including the identity of the client, know your client or KYC checks, use reliance only when the third-party information is reliable, understand the nature of the client and the transaction, examine the supply chain appropriately. They should document compliance with a professional standard. They should agree written terms of engagement with any third-party compliance checks services. Understand emerging asset classes and digital currencies. RICS then provide additional guidance on best practice to meet the mandatory requirements, such as having written policies, staff training, and conducting checks on both buyers and sellers. RICS state the following mandatory requirements for members: not to facilitate or be complicit in money laundering or terrorist financing, must not ignore red flags, they are to report any suspicious activity, and they should assess each transaction to agree controls and investigate measures, and they should avoid tipping off. RICS then provide additional guidance on best practice to meet the mandatory requirements, such as undertaking training, complying with employer policies, keeping suspicious activity reports confidential, and taking a leadership role in relation to compliance in senior management. What does the professional standard say about sanctions? RICS state the following mandatory requirements for regulated firms. They are not to engage in and implement systems and controls to avoid engaging in business transactions with specifically designed nationals, SDNs. They should provide staff training, they should carry out regular risk assessment, and they should carry out adequate due diligence screening. RICS state the following mandatory requirements for members. They should carry out appropriate checks to avoid carrying on business relationships with SDNs. What other considerations does the professional standard deal with? Customer due diligence, or CDD, must be undertaken to verify the identity of clients, the validity of the identification documents provided, and additional checks if the transaction or instruction is a high risk. Simplified due diligence, SCC, is acceptable in low-risk situations where full CDD is not needed. Examples include where a client is a local council, registered charity, or stock market listed company. However, in the UK, applying SDD is no longer an automatic option in any situation, and firms must be alert to red flags. Enhanced due diligence, EDD, is required in high-risk situations. RICS also discuss how firms can deal with electronic verification, outsourcing due diligence, reliance on checks, politically exposed persons, PEPs, compliance and ethics champions, codes of conduct, whistleblowing, and AI. If a regulated firm or firm departs from the professional standard, then the departure must be recorded in writing within reason.
Thanks for listening to the Property Elite podcast this week. Head to our website to check out our full blog, free and paid support resources and services, free consultation for every single RICS APC and AssocRICS candidate, and also ask us any questions you have via the website chat blog. See you next week.